So, welcome to another episode of Connection Alchemy. I'm your host, Emma Buggy. I'm a relationship coach, and this podcast is all about transforming your relationship garbage into relationship gold. And I have my dear friend Andy Hicks with me here today. He is a mindfulness coach, and we are going to be talking a little bit about those gremlins that get into your head, those kind of inner critics that can sometimes really stop us from reaching our dreams, our goals, moving forward, not only in our relationships with others, but also within our own lives. Yeah. Andy, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do, as a mindfulness coach?
Yeah, so maybe a lot of people haven't actually heard of a mindfulness coach before. And the way I describe it is the coaching part is helping people to get clearer what their goals are, what they want for their life personally and professionally, and help them to take action towards that. And the mindfulness part is helping people to be more present, to be more in the moment. When we're very goal-orientated and future-orientated, we can have this idea that happiness or success or a sense of contentment and fulfillment is always a little bit further down the road from where I am. And if I can just have a relationship or a better relationship or more money or a job that I want or move to a different place, then I'll be happy. So coaching can kind of feed into that if we're not careful and create the sense of like never quite enoughness. So I like to balance that with the mindfulness part, which is how can I find a sense of contentment and peace now in this moment.
So is it kind of like how to move towards the life that you want and dream of by being happy with exactly what you have right now?
Yeah, exactly. Or you could say enjoying the journey on your way.
Enjoying the journey. So being content with the journey as you continue to move towards reaching your dreams and your goals in your life.
Exactly, yeah.
And I'm curious, Andy, what is it that's happened in your own life? Like, have there been any kind of catalysts or things that kind of got you into this work that introduced you to mindfulness or that made you kind of go down this pathway yourself?
Yes, there have been quite a few things, and it's actually quite a long story how I could get into it, but to say it, how I got into it, but to say it briefly, when I was at university, I was doing a history degree, which I was interested in, but I wasn't super passionate about. But while I was there, I discovered what I was really passionate about, which was climate change. And I read this book called How We Can Save the Planet, which was detailing how screwed we're going to be if we don't address drastically climate change in the next few decades, and how all the flooding that's going to happen and droughts and dislocation and wars and how it's going to be so difficult to have a comfortable life on Earth if we don't deal with climate change. And I really committed myself to this cause, and I became president of People and Planet Society. I tried to change my lifestyle, stop flying, got my family to go to drive to France rather than fly to Greece, became vegetarian. I was known as Captain Planet at university because I had this reputation for being obsessively eco. And I also went to the UN twice where they would do the negotiations for an international agreement. And there was a big now or never moment for the climate movement. COP15. So this was about 15 years ago now. And there was this huge sense of if we don't get the deal this year, it's too late. We're going to be screwed. And we didn't get the deal. And lots of people felt completely burnt out, exhausted, and really just despairing that we threw everything at it and we didn't get the result. And the world is in jeopardy as a result. And I
Huge
also
burden to be holding on your shoulders. Like, wow, the whole
massive.
world is in jeopardy because we didn't succeed. after all of that effort that we've put in.
I mean, we were putting so much pressure on ourselves, and people I knew were going on hunger strike and saying, "I won't eat until we get the deal." And yeah, it's hard to think of a bigger burden to put on yourself.
Huge amount of responsibility. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and then we came away just feeling totally defeated. And I decided I'm going to just take a step back from this whole issue because I can't really see how to make a difference. I was clear that I was passionate about it because I thought it was really important. But where I was losing passion was feeling that I could actually have an impact. Fast forward about 6 or 7 years, and I was on a lads on tour, all inclusive holiday in Tenerife with sunburnt English people drinking lager out of plastic cups at 9 o'clock in the morning.
I can't imagine you, Andy Hicks, drinking lager out of plastic cups on a Monday morning. The Andy I know is now meditating on a Sunday morning.
So at this point, I
Yeah.
had never meditated, and I was
Wow.
very skeptical about the whole thing. In fact, meditation fell into the category of alternative medicine that it disgusted me. It made me
Yeah.
really angry because when you're a climate activist, your allies, everything that supports what you believe in and what you think should happen in the world, is supported by the science. 99% of climate science agrees that we need to do X, Y, Z. And your enemy are the people that question the science and say, oh, no, it's not really happening. There is no climate change, or it's not really because of fossil fuels. We don't need to change anything. Let's just keep burning coal and oil. So anything that's kind of anti-science, that was kind of they're kind of the bad guys.
Threat.
A
Yeah.
threat. Yes. So I put alternative medicine, being unscientific, in that category. And my mum was really into all of this stuff, like Reiki, homeopathy, meditation. I was like, it's bullshit. Why would you do something that's unscientific when there's all these things that are scientific and do actually work? So I'd been kind of anti-meditation up until this point in my life. But I was on this holiday, and one of the people I was on holiday with was a therapist, and I was talking to him about my relationship and saying, I think I'm going to break up with this person I've been seeing for 18 months now. I've been trying to decide, but I think it's over. And I wonder how you would help her as a therapist, because I've been trying to help her with anxiety and low self-confidence. And I just feel like this sort of negative feeling that she has a lot of the time about herself is really affecting me. And it's too much of a burden.
Mm.
And he said, well, maybe meditation could help. And I ended up going back and ending the relationship. And I didn't try to get her into meditation, but I tried it for myself. And I think in the back of my mind, I was imagining that I was not doing it for me because I was fine. I had this idea that it was other people who had problems and my job to fix their problems, but I was okay. And that meditation was going to help me to help other people. And what I found when I first started meditating was I wasn't really fine. And it was almost like the first time in my life that I really noticed what it was like to be me on the inside. And I really felt the agitation and the tension in my back and my neck and the inability to focus and the restlessness and the inability to connect with how I'm feeling. And they would ask me in the meditation, how are you feeling right now? And every time I would just say to myself, neutral. I just think I feel neutral. Like I couldn't identify any emotion. And I thought,
So it's
how
like you
boring.
couldn't feel your body. You didn't even know that you weren't in a good state because you weren't aware of how to even feel that your body was in stress or anxiety or any of that. It was like you were switched off or
No,
numb.
exactly. Unless it was screaming really loudly and I was in pain, I wasn't tuned in. I wasn't feeling it. I wasn't noticing.
Yeah.
And I certainly wasn't aware, like, oh, right now this is anxiety. Oh, right now I feel sad. There was a disconnect there.
Yeah.
And what happened as I started to practice meditation is that I think I basically had ADHD. I really couldn't concentrate for more than about 3 seconds. dramatically changed, and I felt like I was able to read books again for the first time in years. I was able to concentrate so much longer at work. I was having epiphanies about myself and about life and what is anger and what is sadness and about my relationship with my parents and all sorts of things. And it was this incredibly exciting kind of journey that I felt like I was going on through discovering meditation. And so since then, I've been on a mission to share these amazing benefits that I felt in my life of feeling so much less anxious and tense and agitated, and so much more at peace and happy, fulfilled, so much more clear what's important to me, what I want in life, and what actually makes an impact. Because so this was a huge shift from the climate change activism, that this actually has a positive impact that I can feel, not only on myself but on other people as well. And I don't have to rely on these external people called scientists to tell me that it's valuable. I feel that it's valuable.
So I'm curious, because I'm imagining some listeners might have a similar thought. Did that mean that you gave up on climate activism, or do you find that mindfulness gave you a different approach towards what you care about in climate change, a different angle or a different way to view it?
I would say that for a time, it felt like I'd kind of forgotten about it, or just put it to the back of my mind.
Mm.
And now, the way I look at it is that, and this is something that I've understood from a thinker and writer called Charles Eisenstein, that climate change is it's not simply caused by fossil fuels. There's a deeper layer, there's a deeper level of causation, which is a story of that our culture is telling itself all the time, of separation. That I'm separate from you, we're separate from everyone, we're all in competition. It's a survival of the fittest. Everyone's trying to make the most amount of money and spend the least amount of money. Nature is just a resource for us to plunder and maximize for our own gain, our own commercial gain. And this is why that we feel able to treat the earth in the way that we do, to plunder it and pollute it. And this is why we end up with so much polarization and fighting and war and people falling out and hating each other. And and there's an alternative story that's a new and ancient story. Many cultures, Aboriginal cultures, native cultures in America, Australasia and South America, they've known this for probably tens of thousands of years, that we're all interconnected and interdependent, and that I'm not separate from you and I'm not separate from the earth. And that's kind of also what you tap into with meditation. The barrier between you and the rest of the world starts to disintegrate, or soften at least. And I feel more love for the people around me and for the earth. I feel less of a sense of separation. And so that not only means that I feel better in myself, but the actions that I take in the world are more likely to be caring towards the planet and be conducive towards doing something positive about climate change.
So essentially, it's like it's almost like how we look at modern medicine, right? That like with modern medicine, we're trying to um, focus on fixing the symptoms, stopping the symptoms by taking medication. And what I'm hearing you say here is like, let's look at the cause
Yeah.
and really um, bring our attention towards that cause, the separation, which is that mentality of separation is what's causing and adding into the possibility of climate change happening. And so it's like you're wanting to focus more on bringing more connection,
Yeah.
more compassion towards ourselves and towards the whole of life, and hoping that through that, our system will change, our internal systems, our external systems, the whole culture will change. Is that it?
Yes, and this doesn't only apply to medicine. Exactly as you say, it's a mindset which means if I've got a problem in my body, that we need to kind of kill the virus or kill the bacteria or numb the pain. That we're trying to get rid of something. And we apply the same kind of mentality at a cultural, societal level to crime. If there are criminals, we need to destroy them, or we need to lock them up. We need to get rid of them somehow, punish them. Or the drugs trade. We need to just kill all the drug dealers or lock them all up, and that's going to solve the problem we've got with drugs. Whereas if you look at it through a mentality of interbeing and interconnection, and you look for the deeper causation, you see, well, why is there crime? Or maybe it's because there's poverty and inequality, and we need to address that. And we need to support people to be able to make better life choices.
To thrive instead of
thrive.
Yeah.
Why are people addicted to drugs? Maybe because they can't meet their needs in any other way, and so they're desperately reaching out for something that's going to help them to deal with the emotional pain that they're experiencing from not having enough intimacy, connection, or community, or healing from their traumas. So I think this plays out in so many different ways in our society, this idea of separation and trying to destroy the symptom of the problem, which endlessly then just multiplies. You can never actually knock up enough criminals or drug dealers or stamp out enough viruses. Instead of looking at the underlying causes from a mindset of interconnection and we're all part of the same thing.
And I guess, of course, that reflects back on the way that we then relate with ourselves. So the same thing is happening internally, isn't it? Like that we are also trying to fix ourselves, trying to we kind of have, that's where the inner critic comes in. It's like we're comparing ourselves, we're seeing what's broken and trying to fix it through, doing things that get rid of the inner critic. It's almost like there's also this labeled toxic positivity, which is kind of when we say, oh, no, there are no problems, let's just ignore them and they'll go away. Or it's like, everything will be okay, everything will be okay, everything will be okay. I'm smiling, I'm good, I'm happy. I don't like to label it as toxic, because I really see that the intention behind that is to focus on positivity in order to move towards it. However, I kind of see that as in the same category as like fixing the problems, putting a plaster on the wound, and as soon as you take the plaster off, it's all festering underneath. It hasn't healed.
Yes, exactly.
So is that kind of how, I wonder if you could speak a bit to that in terms of mindfulness and a different approach to the inner critic, and maybe first actually giving us some examples of inner critics that we might have towards ourselves, maybe ones that you've come across a lot in your work with your clients or even within yourself. And then we'll have a look at how we could maybe apply mindfulness as a different way instead of that plaster on the wound approach.
Yes, absolutely. You're right to make that connection with the way that we view these outer problems with the way we view ourselves. And maybe another way of describing what's going on there is judgment. We're judging these other people as bad for what they do. We want to punish them or get rid of them. And we're judging ourselves for not being perfect, for having emotions that we don't like, or feelings, or the shape of the body shape that we don't like. And so I think that both mindfulness and MVC have this thing at their core of how do we recognize judgments. And
just for the audience, for those who are listening and you're a new listener, then NVC stands for non-violent communication, which is what all of the past podcast episodes are based on. Sorry for that. Continue, Andy.
Thanks for clarifying that. And so, yes, recognizing our judgments against other people and against ourselves, as being wrong or bad in some way, and seeing if we can convert that voice into a kinder, more compassionate voice. A couple of examples. Well, some came up as we were setting up the recording of this podcast that I had an intention to bring a microphone with me because I'm not at home at the moment. I'm staying with my partner's family, and I forgot it. And as you were saying that you were concerned about the quality of the recording, I felt this judgment against myself. I'm forgetful. I'm stupid. I've let Emma down. People are going to judge me or judge us for the quality of this podcast. And on one level, it's about a microphone. But on a deeper level, it's about shame. I'm not good enough because I've messed this up, because I've been forgetful, because I've been disorganized. If I was a good person, if I was a competent person, I wouldn't have done this. Other people are more competent than me. Other people can do this better than me. I'm a bit useless. I'm a bit of a failure. Oof.
Wow. And we can see how it goes from I forgot my microphone to I'm a failure so quickly at the speed of lightning.
Absolutely. And as I say it, I can feel this kind of heaviness, this kind of wanting to cave in on myself, sort of collapsing into my chair. And also imagining that you're judging me. Oh, Emma must think I'm a bit useless. She must be thinking he's wasting my time. He's unreliable. He's forgetful. I'm kind of having to do things for him, or I need to remind him to do things that he should just be able to remember himself. So that it's creating in my mind this disconnection with this negative perception that I'm imagining you're having and other people are having just from this one thing that's happened, that I have intended to bring a microphone that I didn't bring.
Yeah. And so how would mindfulness and did you apply mindfulness in any way before we actually decided to go ahead with the recording? What did you do? What would be your inner dialogue that would support you to be with that uncomfortable feeling of shame and the stories or the voices of not enough and failure and the fear of judgment from me and towards yourself and from others? Could you talk us through your process that just happened now before we pressed record?
Yeah. Well, you made a great suggestion, Emma, before we got started, because we'd had a bit of frustration with getting everything ready. You said, well, why don't we have a 2 minutes just to settle ourselves and get in the right headspace? And in that time, I did a little practice, which I have learned from some training in mindful self-compassion. And in mindful self-compassion, there are 3 stages that you go through, and each stage addresses one element of shame, or one element of the way in which we end up getting sucked into a sense of not good enough. And the first one is acknowledging. So often, if we're feeling a sense of shame, we don't want to acknowledge it. We want to distract, pretend it's not happening, or maybe we just don't realize. So the first thing is acknowledging this is suffering, this is painful, this is difficult. And I did that. I said, oh, yeah, ooh, this is an uncomfortable feeling right now. This is suffering. I am suffering. And it's amazing how just that stage, just acknowledging that suffering is suffering, so often helps you feel better.
Yeah.
Doesn't sound like it should, but it does.
Yeah.
The second one is
Do you mind if I just quickly bring in a reason why that might be? Because I think it could support. And I think I've mentioned this in a past episode, but I don't have access in my brain right now to the correct science of it. But I do remember reading in Letting Go I will reference the title and the author in the podcast notes. But there's the letting go technique, which the premise of the letting go technique is to recognize whatever it is that you're feeling, including if it's resistance to feeling, and to allow that to be there, knowing that any emotion only exists for about 40 to 60 seconds, because essentially an emotional reaction is a chemical release from the brain of certain chemicals that make us feel a certain way. And it is the repeated thoughts, even if unconsciously, that keep us in an emotional state of pain or discomfort or joy. So it's the repeated kind of cycle of thinking that keeps us producing more of those same chemicals, which reignites the emotional experience. Whereas when we just recognize it and allow it to be there, naturally it will transform into another emotional experience and it will change.
Yes. Yeah. So that is effectively what you're doing. You're recognizing and allowing just by saying, this is suffering.
Yeah.
It is what it is. It's a really helpful description. Thank you. And yeah, absolutely agree with this idea that we keep these emotions sort of swirling around, or we feed them by thinking about them again and again and again, replaying things in our mind. So the idea is partly as well to get out of the story and into the experience. What can I feel in my body? I can feel this tightness in my belly. I can feel the sense of wanting to shrink. Okay, this is suffering. This is uncomfortable. Second stage is called common humanity. So you might have noticed when I was describing my reaction, I had this narrative of, I'm the only one who would have done this mistake. Everyone else would have done it better than me. So often when we're feeling shame about something, a part of that is a sense of aloneness, separation, being uniquely broken, useless, pathetic, a failure. So common humanity is recognizing, reminding ourselves, everybody suffers.
Yeah.
Universality of suffering. Everybody experiences suffering, pain, failure. Everybody makes mistakes. Everyone gets rejected. Everyone gets heartbroken. Everyone trips over and falls on their face. This is just part of being human.
And I wonder if the point there is not to kind of it's not to sort of like diminish your suffering and say, well, come on now, everyone suffers. It's more to be in this sense of like, I'm not alone in my suffering. I'm not the only one who's suffering. And there's something comforting about knowing that we all suffer. It's part of the human experience. So it's not the kind of like, come on, mate, he suffers too. They suffer. What you crying about? It's the it's the opposite from that. It's that kind of like comfort in knowing that we all suffer. We're not alone in our suffering.
Yes, and I would actually use that language. I'm not alone in this. You're not alone in this.
Yeah.
And you could perhaps say that there is a near enemy, which is what you've just described. It's like, oh well, other people have it worse than me. And then
Yeah.
you're sort of saying to yourself that I shouldn't be making a fuss, diminishing, as you said, the importance of the suffering that I'm experiencing. So we're not doing that. We're exactly as you say, reminding ourselves of the common humanity, of the fact we're not alone in our experience.
Yeah.
And then thirdly, it's showing kindness towards ourselves. So often if we're experiencing shame, then a part of that is beating ourselves up. I'm a terrible person. I'm useless. We have this negative talk, and that we might also have negative gestures or actions. We might pinch ourselves or hit ourselves or squeeze our fists or even hit ourselves in the face. I've heard people saying that they really physically abuse themselves when they're feeling shame. So the opposite of that is holding yourself in a way that feels tender or supportive. So it's good to kind of experiment. Maybe people listening could try now. Does it feel good to place your hands on your chest, maybe your belly and your chest? Some people like to feel their hands on their face. Where feels most comforting? And seeing when you place your hands there, if you can do it with a real gentleness and softness. And I like
Mm.
to suggest that we imagine that our hands are sending kindness directly into our bodies. So this is
There's something
the
so soothing, isn't there,
Mm.
about being holding ourselves in this way?
Yeah, you really feel that. It's exactly the
Yeah.
purpose, is to self-soothe. And often we're looking for some external way to soothe ourselves, whether that's our phone or somebody else, some other human. Please soothe me so that I feel better. And there's something very empowering about being able to self-soothe. So that's one element, is the physical, and another element is the verbal. And you can use any words you want, but I often use the words, may I accept myself? May I be kind to myself? May I live with ease? You might want to repeat it a few times yourself.
May I accept myself? May I be kind with myself? May I live with ease?
And just notice the effect that those words have on your system. I notice myself taking a deeper breath and kind of sighing. What do you notice as you do that?
Yeah, I notice two things that I find. I know I'm really happy that I experimented with the different postures, because I'm quite used to doing the hand on heart and belly. But then I thought, no, I'm going to try that, and my body really responded with the kind of like, yes, please cuddle me and hold
Oh,
me.
sweet.
It's almost like a child wanting to be really wrapped. So I'm glad that I tried the different postures. And then when I did the speaking, I noticed that the may I for me didn't resonate. So I used my own version, which is that I love and accept myself exactly as I am, no matter what. And that for me touched me. And so I'm loving this kind of, maybe an invitation to those that try this, to try out the language and the touch and the ways that soothe you. It's gonna be individual for each person, isn't it? I imagine. Do you find that?
Absolutely, yes. I agree that there's much more powerful when you find the way that suits you the best. Another
Yeah.
thing that some people find challenging is that they think that they don't deserve to accept themselves or be kind to themselves. It's
Yeah.
too much of a stretch. So
Yeah.
another variation is to say, may I begin to learn to accept myself?
That feels really sweet. May I begin to learn to accept myself. Yeah, I notice my body feel really resting into that. That feels very possible for me
Mm,
to begin to do.
yeah.
And I'm also wondering, Andy, because it's almost like in the work that I do, like mindfulness and NVC have a lot of similar. They kind of cross into each other. They dance with each other. They are made of the same elements. It's just a slightly different avenue into the same thing. Um, which is, yeah, how to speak with ourselves and others with more compassion and honesty, and meeting ourselves exactly where we are, meeting the pain exactly where it is. Um, and I've just suddenly forgotten what I was going to say. So I'm just going to self connect for a moment. Sad I lost it.
Is
I
your
can
inner
always,
critic speaking at this moment?
yeah, my inner critic is, yeah, it's actually really, really alive right now. It's like, oh, my brain is not as clever as Andy's is. I lose things that I want to say and information. Even actually, Andy, as you're speaking and you're talking about your journey with this work, I notice a small inner critic in me that's comparing and that's going, when I record the podcast, I should sound more like Andy does. Which is very familiar to me. And actually, I know that we're now sidelining away from what we were doing before, but I feel like it could be relevant for our listeners. I have come across one or two very strong inner critics that have a very particular message in myself. And in the past, it would come up in different versions. And so, right now, the one that I'm talking about is another version of this inner critic that I know very well within myself, which is kind of what I call a core belief. It's like a core belief that I've internalized so deeply that I really believe it's true. And that's limiting me in my life. It's stopping me from expressing and moving into who I really am. And so I've done a lot of work with this core belief and I've transformed it a lot. And yet sometimes it still comes up. And I believe that's natural, that it's not that the core belief will disappear like 100%, but it's like 90% gone or 80% gone. And then every now and again it still comes up and I recognize it. I'm like, hello, old friend. But so my one is that I'm fundamentally stupid. Like that, really, at the core of it, I am just fundamentally not that clever. And as I say that now, there's another huge part of me that's like, I really don't believe that to be true at all. I'm like laughing because I'm like, sweetheart, I believe it to be completely the opposite. I love my way of being and thinking and living in the world with curiosity. And yet that belief, that fundamental belief that I'm stupid, which came up in my life being dyslexic and struggling at school and being separated in all of my classes and my family parents not knowing how to understand that because no one did back then, it was really, anyway, that's the whole backstory. I wonder if that's a common thing that you find with your clients, that they might have one or two core critics that come back to haunt them and stop them from actually reaching their goals and their dreams. And if you do, so maybe the first part is, does that happen? And then the second part is, if you do have that, how do you work with them to sort of transform or be with those inner critics? And yeah, like what's the light at the end of the tunnel with those really hardcore ones that seem to stick?
Yes. I first want to say I really appreciate your openness and authenticity. There's something to me that feels almost like this brings more aliveness or even more excitement to the conversation when you share more about what's going on underneath the lid. Because I couldn't tell at all that you're having that thought. And I think it's quite vulnerable to share these things, about these core criticisms or feelings of shame that we have. So I really appreciate you being
Yeah.
open about that.
It's Andy.
And,
Pleasure.
and I felt the sadness because, yeah, I know you. I know you have this part of you as well. I have an overwhelmingly strong part. It's like, how could Emma think she's stupid? She's so intelligent. She's got. I've never thought for a second, oh my goodness, Emma's such a stupid person. She's so unintelligent. And I think that speaks to another sort of aspect of shame. Is it's often so divorced from reality, or it's a way of viewing ourselves that's so different to how almost everybody sees us.
Yeah. Yeah. That feels really true. Because whenever I share this in a critic with my friends, I always get the same face that you just showed me. Like, what? Like, Can we like, what are you talking about? Where did you pick that from?
And yet it can still be really sticky as when we have these beliefs. It almost doesn't matter sometimes, people telling us, oh, I don't think that about you, that's not true. It can still be really hard to
Yeah.
let go of.
Because it comes from a wounded place very often. It comes from a wounded part of us that's experienced something so traumatic or painful, and it's there as a protective mechanism. It's there to protect us. Which almost sounds weird, isn't it? Like that core belief that I'm stupid is there to protect me.
Yes. Yeah, do you want to say something about how it protects you?
Yeah, for me, I've come to realize that if I judge myself as stupid first, it's a lot less painful than me receiving the grades from the teacher and the report from the teacher at school that confirms that to be true. So it's almost like I'll do that. I'll make sure that we know that I'm stupid. And therefore, we won't try things that require me to connect with my intelligence. So for a long time, I never studied anything that would be considered academic. I never studied academic subjects. I was like, I'm just going to stick to art and drama because I'm good at that. And that's not going to feel painful for me to go into. So the I'm stupid core belief stops me from doing things that make me feel stupid, that make me trigger that belief. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
It's kind of like counterintuitive, but somehow it works. And then it stops me from moving forward in life at the same time.
it is kind of counterintuitive, but it also kind of makes sense that you want to protect yourself from the judgment that might come from other people that you're
Exactly.
stupid. We think that you failed this test, you're not good enough in this subject by not, and you try to avoid that by not even trying or avoiding
Yes.
studying.
Yeah.
But then the thing that's sort of counterintuitive, or where the sort of logic almost breaks down, is that then you're telling yourself you're stupid all the time. So you're creating the thing you want to avoid.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And even as I'm speaking to you in this conversation, there's moments where I can't quite grasp the word that I know is there. And that's a common thing for me. Like I have such a, I don't even know if this is a right word, but I'm going to use it, a lexicography. Like I have such a rich vocabulary available to me. I write poetry and I love using language. But sometimes when I go to speak, it's like the word that I'm about to say, I lose it in the moment of saying it. And that's when the I'm stupid belief gets really intense. And sometimes it stops me from sharing fully, or it gets me to go a really uncomfortable route in order to make sense, and then I overspeak and then I feel ashamed about that. And so the I'm stupid belief really affects my ability to just express, whereas when I notice that and I meet it with compassion, something unlocks, and then I speak and it flows through me, even if I'm not using the word that I wanted to use. It feels connected to life, whatever I'm saying.
When
So
you're
it's like it's
when you're compassionate about having the thought, I'm stupid.
yes, when I recognize the I'm stupid belief, because it's been many years that I've been working with this belief now, like maybe 5, 6 years. So now I notice it almost most of the time, not always, but a lot of the time I notice it quite quickly, like, oh, there it is, and it's on my shoulder. So if I can meet it with compassion, then it unlocks that part of me that trusts in myself and does feel um I don't even want to use the word intelligent because that creates the imbalance, but that I feel connected with what I'm saying and I believe in myself. And so whatever inspiration wants to flow, flows. But that's only when I get to meet that I'm stupid with compassion. Because if not, then I end up stuttering or I end up over speaking or I end up doing something that feels uncomfortable in my body.
Yeah, and then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy
Yes.
because you're
Yes,
feeling
because then
anxious.
people might look at me and be a bit confused. Then they'll look at me with this, like, what? And then I'm like, oh, it's true. I am stupid because they're confused and they didn't get it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's like it's confirmation bias, isn't it? You're sort of proving it to yourself and to the world.
Yes. So I'm imagining that this is something that clients of yours that you come across a lot in maybe in different ways. Is that true? That you meet that regularly, like a system of inner critics or core beliefs that are coming up for people?
Yes, I would say the core belief that I haven't found anyone who's not got this belief is I'm not good enough.
I'm
And
not
there's
good enough. Yeah,
different flavors of I'm not good enough. I'm not lovable. I'm not perfect enough. Um, clever enough. Attractive enough. Yeah, I think that's for me. That's like the simplest way of putting it. Not good enough.
not enough.
And it's kind of funny to think. So it kind of breaks down as seeming a bit ridiculous quite quickly if you just ask, well, not good enough for what? Like not good enough to who? It's like there is this sort of arbitrary bar that we've created that we're not clearing, but who set the bar of how we should be? It's imaginary, but it feels so real.
It really does.
And the way that I explore it with people often is through dialoguing with the part that is sometimes the inner critic, sometimes the people pleaser. If it's the inner critic, then I would say it's like a role play. So I say to them, who am I speaking to? And they say, this is the inner critic. And I would ask, okay, inner critic. So what do you criticize? Let's say I'm doing it on myself. What do you criticize Andy for?
Let's do it with me. Let's
Oh,
do it
with you.
with my stupid part. Let's do it so it's because that part's still here a little bit, So let's do it real,
Perfect.
like so that we can role play it.
Perfect. So
Okay.
the idea is that we talk to your inner critic, and this inner critic is separate from Emma. It's part of you, but it's not you. So the inner critic might say, as the inner critic, I criticize Emma for not being clever enough. Does that make sense? So we're separating you out.
Okay.
And I'm going to ask some questions to the inner critic, and I just want you to say the first thing that comes to mind. Don't overthink it. Don't think this is a
Okay.
clever answer.
Just be immediate, like honest with it. Okay.
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind. So I would like to speak to the inner critic. Who am I speaking to?
Yeah, you're speaking to the part of me that believes that I'm stupid.
Oh, that's
The inner
a slightly
critic.
different part. Is that the part you want to speak to?
Um, Actually, no, it's the two. It's a bit more that part. I was trying to do that part because I was like, that's what we were talking about before, but it doesn't feel online right now. Yes, there's an inner critic that's just generally here, and it has a few other thoughts. Shall I mention them, or shall I just say, yeah, the inner critic's here?
Just say, yep, it's the inner critic here.
Yep, the inner critic's here.
Hello, inner
Definitely.
critic. Good to have you here.
Hi.
Welcome. So tell me some of the things that you criticize Emma for.
She talks too much. She's a blabbermouth. And she digs herself into really uncomfortable holes when she does that. Yeah. Because she speaks in order to be like understood and seen and heard and met. But she does it out of urgency. And then and because the urgency is leading the show, she blabbers and it doesn't make sense, and then people get confused and she loses their attention. Oh,
Sounds like you get a bit frustrated with Emma.
yeah.
Do you feel like
I noticed another part that wants to defend myself. It's like, no.
so that's good to notice that there is
Two
other
parts.
parts, that it's not all of you that is the inner critic. Just for now, we're only going to speak to the inner critic.
Yeah, okay.
Do you think, as the inner critic, that Emma has been talking too much on this podcast?
No, no, no. I'm embarrassed to say where it was.
Would you rather not say?
No, I think I want to be my full self. It's just I want to notice that there's the embarrassment because there's fear of judgment. It was in a recent workshop that I gave
Emma gave.
that I offered. Yes, it was like a particular session
But it's really important that when you say I, you're being the inner
that
critic, and you're not
okay,
being Emma.
okay, that I gave.
That Emma gave. Oh, who are we speaking
Emma
to?
gave. I was speaking to the inner critic. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That Emma gave. Okay.
So there was a recent workshop where she talked too much, and people didn't really understand,
Yeah, I
or it
think
seemed
that
like.
it's I think they understood, but she definitely just I can tell that she wasn't self-connected when she was teaching.
So, what do you, as the inner critic, what do you want for Emma? Why do you exist?
I want to make sure that she lives with integrity and really does the things that she wants to do in the world and lives from a place of um, passion and aliveness and connection to people and is doing something meaningful and is not sort of like falling into the painful behaviors and ways of being that she doesn't enjoy.
Mhm. Oh wow. Okay. So, as Emma's inner critic, you want her to enjoy her life. You
Of
want her to have,
course.
yeah. You want her to have connection, meaning, fulfillment. You want her to be her best self. It sounds like,
Yeah, definitely.
and to really meet the needs in her, which are really important.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely my role.
So, I think we can all get on board with that as a goal.
Yeah, it is a beautiful goal.
We all want that for Emma.
Yeah, of
And
course
what?
we do.
Sorry.
Of course we
Of
do.
course we do. And what is your strategy for helping her to achieve that goal?
I tell her off. I tell her off. I get her to feel ashamed and I go, "Oh God, you've done that again. Why did you do that again?" And I kind of get her to sort of mull over and think over all the things that she did wrong and she should have done differently. I compare her to other people. I tell her that they're doing it right and you're doing it wrong. And I sometimes tell her to she might as well just pack it all in and stop doing what she's doing. I can get very dramatic to try and get her to meet that goal. Yeah.
So you tell her off, you cause her to feel shame, you sometimes suggest that she just gives up completely.
Yeah.
You cause her to compare herself to other people and say, well, they're doing it right and Emma's doing it wrong.
Yeah.
And does this help Emma to meet her needs of fulfillment, connection, growth, aliveness?
Yes and no. It doesn't. really help her at all. No, in the long run. And at the same time, when she feels uncomfortable, she's more likely to do something about it.
So you're
So there's a
prompting.
part of me that believes that, yeah.
So you're prompting her through discomfort to change something, to get better at something.
Yes.
And does it work? Does she get better at things through you, the inner critic?
I don't know. I'm confused now because I think I think it's a mixture. Like in this moment, I think it's a mixture of Emma having a relationship with me where she now knows what it is that I'm trying to support her with. And so yes, she does move towards the things that are she wants. But I don't think without that relationship with me that what I'm doing helps, because in the past, no. So it depends on if you're asking past or present Emma.
I'm asking.
With present Emma, I think we do have some kind of relationship, and she does make those changes and she does move towards the life that she wants. And at the same time, if it was just me on my own, no.
Okay, so you realize that if it's just you on your own criticizing Emma as the inner critic, that doesn't really help her.
No.
More recently,
It puts her in a hole.
it puts her in a hole of shame and despair, having the
And then
same.
she feels paralyzed.
She
She
feels
can't move.
she feels paralyzed. She can't move. Doesn't actually help her move forward. But as she's
No.
developing more of a relationship with you as the inner critic, she's been more recently able to listen to the message that you're trying to give her about
Yeah.
wanting her to meet her needs more effectively, and
Yeah.
therefore you can be a force for good in her life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, inner critic. Really good to speak to you.
Thank you.
There's a principle, which is also the name of a book, which is no bad parts.
Yes, I know this book.
And I think that it's very easy for us to think that the inner critic is a bad part because it's causing us this
Yeah.
despair and shame and the suffering and go away. Oh, stop criticizing me. I'm my own worst enemy. I wish I could not be like this. But what we're able to see is that this is not a bad part. This part wants the best for Amber and for whoever's mind it's in. It wants us to meet our needs. And maybe those strategies for how to meet the needs aren't always very effective, or sometimes we need to just develop a different relationship, like you were saying, with this voice,
Mm.
so that we can listen to the needs and respond in a way that isn't just paralyzed or in a hole of shame, but is thinking, well, how could I meet this need? How could I do it better next time? What can I learn from this situation?
Yeah. So this is something that I do in a slightly different way, parts work and listening to the inner critic, and um with my clients as well, and also with myself. Now I have like a notebook and a practice that I implement in order to, when I hear that voice, support me to find the goodies, the gems, the needs that you mentioned, that we mentioned before. Um, but I wonder from a mindfulness perspective, because like I said, NVC and mindfulness are so similar. It's almost like you're taking me through a process that I take myself through, but it does have a slightly different lens and a slight, or a similar lens but a different angle, a different languaging, which I like, because it kind of um it gives me more access and more possibility and more variety of ways to meet that inner critic with compassion. So I'm wondering, if we took one of the inner critic voices that you hear a lot from your clients, like I'm not something enough, let's say, to give me one that you hear very regularly.
I shouldn't be feeling like this.
I shouldn't be feeling like this. Okay. What is the simplest And yeah, what is the simplest thing that they could do now with that inner critic in this moment that could take them, like a couple of minutes, to recognize maybe the wisdom of that inner critic and get them closer to thinking about other ways that they could meet their needs? Is there anything that you could imagine they could do within a few minutes?
Yep. I would suggest turning it round and seeing if it's possible to say to yourself, it's okay to feel like this.
It's okay to feel like this.
Yeah. And closing your eyes and really noticing what it is that you're feeling. Is it that my mind is racing? Is it that my breathing's tight? Is it that I've got clenching in my stomach? Maybe it's something that's very uncomfortable, but maybe it's not intolerable. Is it just okay? Is it possible to just let that be there, whatever it is?
Yeah.
And maybe if you can, reconnecting with the sense of touch, the giving yourself a hug or putting your hands particularly on the areas that feel uncomfortable. If something's tight, then can you put your hand over there, imagining that you're giving this area kindness? It's okay to feel like this. And there's no situation where this doesn't apply. Whether we're feeling numbness, nothing, whether we're feeling really intense emotion, we're feeling like very subtle, I can only just feel something. It's okay to feel whatever it is. And I've been on retreat with a really great meditation master who's studied meditation with some of the top teachers in Southeast Asia for 10 years and been in mountains doing solitary retreats with great lamas and all sorts. And whenever people were asking him questions on this retreat, his answer always seemed to be the same. You just feel it and accept it. Feel it and accept it. Feel it and accept it. And I think there's so much.
Feel it and accept it. So it's actually, we're looping back to what we were talking about before. That letting go technique is all about feeling, accepting, and that the transformation of emotions will happen the more we're able to allow ourselves to just meet our emotional experiences with curiosity, with acceptance, with allowance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Apologies if you could hear the yappy dog in the background.
That's all right. So I think what this brings us to, Andy, is because I guess people might be wondering, yes, okay, so once I accept it, how do I move closer to my needs? And um, that's something that we're going to be exploring in our workshop that we're offering together. We're offering 2 workshops, which are basically the same workshop repeated twice. In case you can't make the first one, you can come to the second, or maybe you want to come to both, for those that are in London. And it's called Connecting Mindfully, Befriending Your Inner Critic and Transforming Conflict into Deeper Connection. And so the reason that myself and Andy have decided to collaborate on this is because we really see that there's such a gem in the intersection of what we both offer with mindfulness and compassionate and authentic communication. And so there's going to be sort of like one whole section of the workshop dedicated to transforming those inner critics into a language of wisdom. So that's where we'll really get to dive deeper beyond the accepting and the feeling of the emotion. Okay, it's the next step. It's like, okay, so I have this dream that I find myself not experiencing, and that's when my inner critic comes up. So, how do I move towards that dream? How do I make that dream more and more possible whilst accepting and meeting myself with compassion? And so there'll be a whole day where we're going to kind of dive into that. And the second day is going to be more on how we can relate to other people when they're criticizing us, when they speak to us in a way that's really harsh and painful, and they're being mean and not very kind? What is the kind of experience that we have internally in terms of judging ourselves and them that creates separation and disconnection? And how can we start to translate and transform those uncomfortable messages that they're saying to us into a language that's actually golden and full of opportunity for deep connection, beauty, and coming together? So I'm very, very excited that we're going to be offering that workshop together. And I would add maybe one more step for those who are listening, in case you want to get closer to the needs behind your inner critic, which is to, I actually really like the way you asked that question. Why is this particular critical voice here? Why are you here? And I would add to it, what are you caring for? What are you caring for? So if you notice that you have an inner voice that's saying, I should be different or I shouldn't be feeling this way, ask yourself the question, what is this voice? What is this part of me caring for? And that might get you closer to the needs, the values that you are dreaming to experience and that you're not experiencing, and therefore criticizing yourself.
I think that's
Would you add anything to that?
I think that's a really beautiful question to ask. You can hear Maddie in the background again. Sorry about that.
Yes.
I was just going to say as well, for someone who's so unintelligent, you describe that with incredible clarity and simplicity in a way that I thought I wouldn't be able to describe it that well. That's brilliant, Emma.
Well, thank you for helping me meet myself in reality again. It just makes me laugh. I laugh because it's again the absurdity of the inner critic. It's like it's such a harsh language that I've learned in school, I've learned at home, I've learned in the culture, in the system that compares us to one another. That's why we speak to ourselves in this way. It's not just out of thin air. You know, we are saturated in a culture of comparison, blame, judgment, better than, worse than, not good enough. And that's why we have those voices.
Absolutely, yeah. I think the only things I would add was to tell people when it is. So 2nd and 3rd of February and 16th, 17th of March. It's at a beautiful venue in North London. It's one of the most beautiful venues I've been to in London, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. It's gorgeous.
Very lovely lady called Natalia who hosts us, and she's made this house kind of it's like a haven, isn't it? As soon as you...
It really is. People say they don't want to leave after our workshops. They're like, I don't want to go home.
Yeah, so I would come to our workshop just to be in the venue for 2 days.
Yeah.
Never mind the content.
Yeah, just to have a retreat.
Yeah. But yeah, I think we're offering something quite special and unique. And there's lots of courses on mindfulness. There's lots of courses on NDC. But it's not that often that you see them being combined together so that you can see, how do I develop a kinder inner voice, and how do I receive people when I'm experiencing them as being critical or disrespectful in a more skillful way that's not, instead of leading to more conflict, leading to more connection.
Yeah, absolutely. Beautifully put, Andy. My goodness, I can't wait for February to come. I'm so excited. Andy and I have collaborated a few times already, and I just feel like we have such a flow when we work together. It feels so complementary, both our energies, our friendship, and the work that we offer. So I can't wait to offer this particular workshop. And if you have any questions, just send us an email. There'll be a link to both the workshop, my website, Andy's website, and our email addresses in case you want to ask us any questions. Please do follow this podcast, because we will be doing another episode on, how to translate those painful criticisms from other people into gold in another episode. And we've got another episode that we've already recorded. So yeah, if you want more of this, just follow us basically. And also following us really helps us to reach more people. The more that people that follow the podcast, it does something to the algorithm, and it means that we show up in more people's feeds, which makes it more possible for us to reach others who might enjoy the words that we share. And that makes it more sustainable for me to make the podcast and to keep offering it. So please do follow and share, and we'll speak again soon.
And hopefully we'll see you at one of our workshops.
Absolutely. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you, Emma. Really enjoyed the conversation.